Hey, hi everyone. BK, nice to see you.
Howdy.
I'm hoping some of you have now got some of the basics of n8n going. I must say, every time I try and do something new, I wade in too deep and I find it very, very challenging. But there are tons and tons of good resources on YouTube. And I find myself sort of increasingly like sitting watching YouTube videos and just walking in here and basically trying to remember what the guy said on the YouTube video. So I think at some point there's diminishing returns and you should just watch the YouTube video. Because they do a hell of a lot better job than what I'm doing. There are a few people who managed to get their own hosted n8n versions up and running, and I'm going to share as part of this session a nice literally one-click recipe for getting n8n hosted on your own server on Railway, which is a nice cloud hosting service for about $5 a month, which allows you to do much like what I've done here, which is sort of set it up and then allow a team of people to use it. If anyone's wanting to do that, I'll add that to these resources, and come and make a time with me if you want a little bit of help connecting your domain to that. So you can have, agents.Peregian Hub or whatever your domain is, and then that sort of becomes part and parcel of your AI infrastructure, I guess, for your company, and you can just, as you like, start building automated workflows. So just a reminder, the whole idea of this, I guess, is that, the whole promise of AI is that it's supposed to give us major productivity boosts, and I'm certainly feeling massive productivity boost, but I think the next step you can get to is if you've got the AI working for you when you're sleeping or not at your computer, obviously that can give you another big productivity boost. And for that to happen when your computer is closed, it obviously means that we need to have AI sitting up in the cloud doing agentic work for us on our behalf. And that's where something like n8n comes in. It's not a replacement for any of the other things we've covered, but I think of it as basically our AI agents in the cloud that can work for us when we're not sitting at our computer or on our phone. And that extends the amount of productive capability we can have. So the more that we can put in the cloud and we can trigger through we can trigger those workflows through something other than us sitting at our computer, then obviously we can get more and more done without sort of having to manually trigger those things. Okay, so what I thought we would try and get through today, and this one relatively straightforward, this one quite challenging, this one relatively straightforward, this one now and impossible. The Google Auth one, honestly, if you ever want to see the definition of technical debt, is the Google Cloud Console. Getting OAuth and things set up with that is extremely, extremely challenging. Slack to an extent is the same. So those two are a little bit challenging. But I thought we'd just quickly jump into webhooks because there's a lot you can do with webhooks. Think of a webhook as effectively creating almost like an email address on the internet that apps can send information to. And they send information to that email address, and when it receives it, it can then, in our case, it can then take the information that comes in, because generally the information is sort of structured. You can take that information and feed it into one of our workflows. So let's jump into a very quick show and tell on that. So we're in n8n. Has everyone got their little n8n up and running? You can continue to use the one I shared with you, or hopefully you're getting your own one set up. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on webhook as a trigger here. So you'll see this webhook. I learned a nice little keyboard shortcut. By default, it pops this modal up, and if you just hit escape, you can get rid of that without having to click around. Now, you know how I said a webhook is like a sort of email address in the cloud? If you double click on it, you'll see this is basically the email address in the cloud that we've been given. Now, the reason for this ugly looking hexadecimal string here is that we want to sort of have, because our webhooks will often be exposed to the broader internet, we don't necessarily want them to be guessable URLs. So this is a sort of unguessable URL, and I've learned that you can actually just click it here, and you can change that as you like. But the purpose of it is, think of it like a Google Doc. One of the things I love about Google Docs is I could share with you guys a Google Doc with a sort of unguessable URL that effectively makes it public, but makes it public and available to only people who know what the URL is. So by default, you see this tab here, we have test URL, we have production URL. The webhook URL is exactly the same, except it's webhook-test for test. And then once we switch on this workflow, it's going to go across to our production URL. Okay, so what can we do with this and why is it interesting? So a very, very quick test you can do is if you just click in, this, it'll copy the URL to your clipboard, open a new tab, paste it into a new browser window. Now we're just going to send some information to this, and we can send some information to this right in the browser. The quickest, easiest way to test this webhook, just put a question mark at the end, which means we're now going to add some parameters, and we're going to send those parameters to this webhook. And just for argument's sake, I'm going to say first name equals Bob, and then if I want to put a second parameter in, I use and I'm going to say last name equals Smith. All right. Now, if I hit enter, I'm just got to make sure that my webhook was listening, and I don't think it was. So sorry, I've just got to go back here. There's a step that I missed. So now my little test webhook is listening. If I go back and I click on this, you can see it comes back and says the workflow was started. And if I go back into this webhook here, I should see some information was received. Does everyone get that a little bit? Let me do it again. So we're going into our webhook here. We're copying this URL. We're clicking on listen for test event, meaning it's listening. It's the email address in the cloud is listening for some information to be sent to it because we're testing it. We then just open up a new browser tab, we paste that in, and to send the data, we have the email address, now we have to give it some information. So we're going to put a question mark, and I'm just putting two parameters there. These things can really be totally arbitrary. You can see the format is basically, this is called a key value pair. There's a key, first name equals the value, and an and separates the second key value pair. Last name equals Smith. You can make it whatever you like. And what you should see is you should see workflow. Let me just make sure my listener was listening. Not listening, stop listening. Just check, maybe it isn't. I'm just going to save this as test, CB test webhook. Has everyone sort of got that working, except for me?
You just had to save it, Chris, I'll sort it out.
Sometimes it doesn't want to stop listening. Stop that, it still keeps going. Sometimes just refresh it. Don't let me hold you up. Has everyone else got that working? So you're seeing webhook has started. Now, of course, what that now means is we could have quite a nice complicated workflow after that, like the AI agent workflows that we've been building over the last couple of weeks, which we're going to do in a second now. So what we proved there was that we could send some information to this webhook, it would receive it, and it told us that it had triggered the workflow. So if everyone's got that bit understood, let's add an agent. We all know how to do that from the last couple of weeks. So you're going to click on this next thing here. You're going to add an AI agent. We are, of course, going to add our open router chat model, the brain. We're going to select the model. We can just select GPT 4.1 mini for that. And now, if everyone's got to this part, we can do a cool thing in here where what we want to do here is we want to take our inbound message that comes from the webhook, and we want to put that in a little template in our AI agent and have it do something with that and then give us something out the other end. So let's just say we go with this example that I've created of first name, last name, and we just want to make up a short story about that person, and we want to return that as the output of the AI agent. How does that sound? Can be anything, but for the purposes of just testing this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go define below. We're going to go define below, and we are going to we're going to say the user's name is, and to be an expression, and I want to see this previous node. How do I just do this previous node? Okay, just while that's working. And then I want to add in my system message, you are a storytelling agent. You can tell stories about people based on their names. All of your stories are 100 words long. So let's just say all of your stories are 1 sentence long. So we can see what we're missing here. We're just missing, what we want to do is we want to put in the variables here. So we all know what we're doing here. This is our system message for our agent, which tells it, sets up its role, it sets up its goal. And then what we want to do is we want to have a user message, because we know how this works. The user message, when this agent runs, the first thing is the system message, which tells it what it is and what its goal is. And then a user message gets appended to that, and that gets sent to the LLM. So we're telling it what it is, and then all we have to tell it is what the user's name is, and what it should give us is a nice 1-sentence story about that user. Okay? So in order to put these fields in here, what I want to do is I want to just say first name, last name, and I want to get that information from the webhook that just got passed in, pass it into a variable there, so that no matter what first name, last name you put in, it gets passed into our agent each time. So if go in here and
It's working. Mine worked, Chris.
yours worked? So did you just put, what did you put in here,
Well, the
Davey?
input data came across on the left, and then I just dragged
Good.
them in. First name, last name, dragged the fields across, and then clicked execute, and it's
Yeah.
come up with a story.
So you guys already know much more than I do.
But it dragged, it pulled
Yeah,
in.
so I want to drag, but I'm not seeing my input from the previous step here. So I guess I've got to click on this and I've got to test it. So there's my test.
Listen
And
for
I'm going to
test
go
event.
back here. Is it listening? It needs to be listening.
You need to
Test.
click, yeah, that's it.
Okay, so now I'm going to just go Bob Smith, and I should hopefully see this here. I do. Okay, great.
Now pin it.
Pin it, okay.
There you go.
All right, thank you, Steve. This is a very, I did not know this. This answers a lot of things for me. Because you saw how I wanted to go to that next step. And I wanted to be able to access the data from the previous step, but I wasn't able to. It kept saying execute previous step. This is a problem I've had always with this thing. So now what's going to happen is if I pin that, it's going to pass this information on to the next step for me to test, isn't it?
Yeah, so pin it.
Okay, so if I click pin,
Yeah. Now because it's pinned, it's pretty much static. Now if you click away, like
okay,
yeah.
so now if I go
now
in
if you go
here,
into your AI agent,
fantastic. All right, thank you, Steve. You've solved an age-old mystery for me. Most fundamental.
well the beauty about pinning is that it's pretty much permanent until you close that workflow. And so you can make hundreds and hundreds of changes as long as you don't change where you pin the data.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what I want to show you is that if I'd left this as connected chat trigger mode, I didn't really have the ability to edit this field here. Do you see that? So you'll see this in a lot of nodes where the default is that it'll give you a fixed, it'll get a fixed rather than expression, and it'll give you a sort of pre-configured setting there. But if we wanted to bring in information, specific information from the previous step, we need to drop this down and say we want to define that below. Define below means it's going to give us a field for us to do that. So the user's name is, I'm just going to say first name, and then what you can do is across here on the left hand side, these fields are all available for you to use in this particular step. And the way you do that is if you take your cursor and you mouse it over each of these fields, you'll see it becomes a grabber. You can grab, take, and drop that into the field. So first name, last name. Okay. Now I suppose if I execute the step, we should get a nice little test output. There we go. Bob Smith once built a treehouse so extraordinary that it became the neighbor's favorite secret clubhouse. Okay. So that's pretty cool. So let me come out of that, and we're still in test mode here. So if I were to now make this active, perhaps I should save this first. So I'm going to save it. If I now make this active,
You make it active, Chris.
sorry?
If you make it active,
Yeah, it's going to change the webhook
the
URL.
webhook URL will change slightly.
So let me make it active. My little servers
I think your railway is working.
working overtime. Okay, so so I'm going to show you something that doesn't work, and then I'm going to show you something why it doesn't work and how we need to fix it. So if we go back to our little test URL here, we all know that right now it is the test webhook, as you can see up there. We need to remove the test part so that it's the production webhook. So let's do that. And if we get rid of this and we hit our Bob Smith story again, are we going to see a story? We're not going to see a story. And the reason for that is our webhook node here is currently configured, if you look at it, to respond immediately. Okay, do you see how our webhook node here is set to respond immediately, which means it's basically just acknowledging that it got the webhook. It's not waiting for the workflow to finish before, and our workflow could be quite long, could take quite a long time. So what we need to do is we need to drop this down and say use respond to webhook node. Okay, Let's click out of that. And then obviously what we want to do here, if you look for webhook, we're going to have respond to webhook. And that's kind of what this should end up looking like. So we're gonna call this webhook with some data fields. They're going to get passed in. We have a simple AI agent here that we could have whatever those fields are, we could map them into our prompt. That's going to perform the inference, and then it's going to respond to the initial webhook. So if we've done that and we save that workflow,
Chris, where did you do the pinning?
we did the pinning back here when we wanted to test. So we ran that little test, we went to the browser, we hit our webhook, and before we did that, we said listen for test. We ran the test, and then we could see the data in here, and then we pinned it because that data is ephemeral, it sort of disappears. So we wanted to pin it so we could then test the next step. Okay, so we've set this up to respond to the webhook. We're now active, which means we're in production. And now if I hit the same thing, Bob Smith once sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, Atlantic solo, proving his resilience and love for adventure. So now that we have a webhook that we can dynamically send information to, here's a little fun thing you can do. Okay, so copy the webhook URL with the parameters in there, and copy the output, jump into a ChatGPT session, and say, please make a simple static website with a form that accepts first and last name, and then calls a webhook and shows the response. Okay, and then paste. I'm just showing you my prompting technique here. So I'm going to say webhook and webhook response. So my webhook is that, and that's my webhook response. Okay, so all I'm saying to it is, please, and you can use, of course, you can use your preferred coding IDE for this, but just for those that aren't using Cursor or something like that, please make a simple static website with a form that accepts first and last name and calls a webhook and shows the response. You can make that far more complicated if you want, but this is just simple. We're creating a simple little app here. There's the webhook, you just copy and paste that, and then you copy and paste the response format, and let ChatGPT do that for you. It should produce some HTML. When that's finished, copy and paste that HTML into a new file on your computer called index.html. What that basically shows you end to end is how to create
The thing is, there's no
an AI workflow in the cloud,
You have to
trigger it from a webhook,
change this.
and then connect a web app to it, basically. So we just created a very simple web app, which was a form, which most web apps are.
Yeah.
And of course, that form could have been anything. It could have been collecting, it could be an internal form for triggering a content workflow, let's say, where we just put a series of fields in there and they get sent up to the webhook. The webhook catches them, takes those fields, passes them into the AI workflow, which might use them to trigger, say, a social media post or something like that. Does everyone understand the value of that little workflow that we just learned there?
Well, I don't know if it's actually listening for that. Yeah, so it's saying it's
So here was my little one.
execute the hook. So now tap and execute workflow, yep. And now it's saying waiting for you to call this URL. That looks like the production URL, so, but it is inactive, so let's.
But yeah, I mean,
So webhook.
you basically got a little web app there that you built that, you know,
And now paste.
we of course, from what we learned over the last couple of weeks, is that this AI agent could be doing all sorts of things, right?
Just clear the whole thing,
This could have multiple
Oh, you want
tools
that, okay.
down here that it calls.
okay?
It could have
So it's
some
saying it's
agents
not
down
registered.
here that do various
But
things,
it
that
didn't
then
have
produce
the dash
this,
webhook.
that then goes into
And
a little web app that we've created or triggers a secondary workflow or whatever it might be. So, but the sort of skeleton of it is a webhook entry point and a webhook response,
Yeah, you need
and an agent step in between that could be using RAG, so you could, you know, put your various information sources as tools here, as we learned last week. And that little form could be on the website, someone fills out some information, it's their name, email address, etc., the query that they have. This has tools that tells it, okay, if a user has a query about this kind of stuff about the business, go and look in this particular information, brings that back. This has another tool about how we like to format our emails, reads that, comes back, creates the email, sends it back to this particular webhook, or could be sending that to a send email action at this point here. For people who might be interested, I mean, obviously security is a concern. It's a concern that I have because, you know, this little static HTML site that we have, if you go and you view the source, of course, in there is our webhook URL, and our webhook URL is effectively connected to our OpenRouter or OpenAI account. Every call costs cents. Someone could potentially come, view the source of this page, grab that URL, and mischievously just start sending a whole bunch of things to it. So there are some mechanisms to prevent that. The most basic one, and of course, the more worried you are about this kind of thing, you would pay more attention to this particular aspect of it. But one of the things you can do is you'll see here there's an option for ignore bots. So that's one thing you can do. You can ignore bots, and then another thing you can do is put an IP whitelist where you can specify which IP addresses, I think which domains as well, are allowed to access this webhook. So in other words, if we look here on the right-hand side, we should be able to see what
It was down there, X real IP.
Thank you, Steve.
There you go.
So I could whitelist this particular IP address, which is the IP address of the server that my form, my little app is hosted on, so that only it can access and activate this webhook URL. Does that make sense? But there are lots of other ways, and Steve's a bit of an expert being running IT for a medical devices company. You can imagine, the cybersecurity overheads are quite large there. So he's got some good suggestions there about using services like Cloudflare and others to help give you a layer of security over your webhooks. But probably an advanced topic that we don't need to cover today. Okay, so 11:43, we've got 40 minutes or so. Any questions on webhooks? I mean, I know that wasn't in-depth, but that just gives you like the basic skeleton of how you would use a webhook to trigger whatever workflows you want, and using the webhook response to be able to say at the end of that whether it's been successful or not. In fact, I think we have data. Yeah, it's a response. I think that's the guts of it. I don't think we need too much more, but of course, we can add tools. And now suddenly the actual workflow is far more intelligent. It can be doing RAG, going and retrieving information from various sources, It could be searching the web. It could be using different AI models we have. It could be using sub-agents. All the stuff we've learned over the last 2 weeks, the main thing we've learned today is that we can trigger those workflows through something other than a little chat test in here. We can trigger them from a webhook, and you saw how you can create a simple little HTML entry point for that can call webhooks. I will say that a lot of third-party SaaS systems these days offer you the ability to call a webhook after a particular event. I think things like Stripe offer you the ability at the end of a transaction to call a webhook. So you could, for example, imagine someone signs up for a product or a service on your website. You configure this particular webhook. Stripe, they buy the product. Stripe has your webhook. The rule is that you call this webhook on a successful transaction. It would pass some information to that. Of course, it's a Stripe transaction. And you could then use that to trigger a workflow in the cloud that might do something like, sets up that customer in the CRM for provisioning for them or whatever it might be. So a lot of services like Stripe have this kind of like after event webhook call that you can go and put in there. And now you know that you can connect that to a cloud-based AI workflow. So that's pretty handy. All right. The next thing I thought we would try is a Slackbot. Now, the reason I think this is quite valuable is that, one, you don't have any security issues with a Slackbot. Almost everyone, I think, when we did a quick survey over the last couple of weeks, uses Slack internally. We heard from Ryan Griffin in Sprint 2 just how valuable it is to use Slack as a kind of entry point into your company knowledge base. So, for example, when a new staff member comes on board, rather than them slacking everyone to find out what's going on and asking questions and so on, they can simply just talk to an AI in the Slack that is just like an expert on everything to do with the company and can answer all of their questions. So I thought we'd try and who's interested in that idea? Let me just check to see. So wiring these workflows into Slack as a bot. Let's give that a try. So you can hear how excited I am about this. Mostly because I spent 40 minutes before breaking and unbreaking my own one. Okay, so let me go to my reference here. A sec.
I'll help you, Chris. Let's
Thank
figure
you.
it out.
Really appreciate it. The hard part is certainly the authentication bit. The rest of it's relatively straightforward.
I think with a Slack integration, you've got to ask yourself, what do you want to do with that integration? Which direction are the messages going? Are you sending it messages from Slack that you want it to respond to? Or is it just a way of having some external system then notify you using the Slack interface?
Yeah.
And the two are a little bit different.
It's true, there are actually many different sort of modalities for it. I guess the one that I thought I'd show here is the one that I'm familiar with, which is we've got a relatively new trainee at the hub, and I wanted to give her access to pretty much, all the knowledge you would need to rapidly onboard into an environment like this, where you might have questions about, I don't know, how does the lectern work? How does the security system work, et cetera, et cetera.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, to use Slack for what Slack is good at, which is being a chat or presenting a chat interface to a workflow.
Yeah, that's right. In the same way that one is sort of treating the Slack bot as a human in the company,
Yes.
that you can ask questions of and get natural language human answers.
Yes. Okay.
So this is what my workflow looks like for the Slack bot, and I do have it in the slides so we can copy and paste it, because there's a few nuances to this that took me a long time to get right. And let me try and explain what they are. So we're starting with a webhook, which we just learnt about. The webhook is going to be called, so imagine what's happening here. We're going to add a new user to our Slack workspace called whatever you want to call it. And users in your company or organization are going to be able to send that, they're going to be able to DM that thing, just like it's a human, and chat with it and ask it questions and get information back. And the way that it triggers the workflow is it's going to send a webhook with the user's message that they type in, right? So it's going to send from Slack a message to this webhook. We're going to tell Slack what this email address is effectively. First thing it's going to do, and this is where it can be a bit confusing, it's going to check if it's a bot, because I have it set up that that my Slack system is basically sending. The idea was that it would send all messages here, so that if anyone mentions the bot anywhere, you can then respond to any mention of the bot in the workspace. Someone might mention it in a given channel, someone might DM it directly. You want to be able to get that message, and you want to be able to respond back to them based on what the AI agent is doing. So the AI agent in this instance, I've just given it access to my good old hub information. I've given it some simple memory here so that you can have an ongoing conversation with it. So for example, if you asked it something and it responded, you could then ask it a sort of follow-up question, and it won't have forgotten the previous things that you mentioned to it. So it uses simple memory. It's using, GPT 4.1, let's say, 4.1 mini. So ordinarily, you might just think, well, what's all this garbage here? Why do we need all of this stuff? Don't we just go straight from the webhook, straight into the AI agent? But if you're listening to all sort of potential mentions of the bot, you want to filter out the bot messages themselves, because if a bot is sending messages and a bot's sending a message, getting a message, you end up in what's called an infinite loop. So we want to check, is it a bot message? And if it is a bot message, don't do anything, just end at that particular point. Okay, so we're checking to see, is it a bot? If it is a bot, this little node effectively does nothing. If it's not a bot, so it's false, basically what we want to do is, I'm trying to remember what this, then what we want to do is we need a mechanism. Imagine you're chatting with this thing. You're chatting with this particular thing. You don't want this to be a forever conversation. This is one of the sort of limits of Slack. You want to be able to clear and start a new conversation with that particular bot, okay? So I built this little thing where just by sending this little code reset, it effectively wipes the memory of the bot at this particular point in time, so that when you carry on chatting with it, it's a fresh conversation. So it's not always referring back to the previous stuff that you talked about. This is an advanced step. You don't necessarily have to have it, but the way I've set this up is that individuals DM the bot. There are myriad tutorials about how to do this on YouTube, so this is just one way. And I'll show you in a second how this rule works. And this chat memory manager, basically what it does is, if the reset code gets sent here, this effectively wipes out, clears the memory in here. And remember, we've set this at say 20 messages or 10 messages or whatever, keeps the memory so that you can have a backward and forward conversation with the AI. And then at the end, it's sending the message out there. Okay, that's basically what's happening here. So let's see if we can get this working. So rather than everyone going and having to build this sort of individually, I know you all know how to do this bit here. And this bit really is the important bit. This is where you're going to go and add your information sources, and you're going to create sub-agents, and you're going to do all that cool stuff at the bottom there. So this can be very basic to start with. And obviously, you're going to change any of the system messages and stuff that I share with you. So the last slide here, and if you didn't see what the slide URL was, that's it there. In this last slide, you get access to this gist. What is a gist? I may as well take 1 minute to talk about a gist. Does everyone in this room have a GitHub account? Free GitHub account. If you don't have a GitHub account, you should really get one because it's a sort of fundamental piece of this whole coding AI workflow landscape. GitHub is to code what Google Drive is to Google Docs. So a gist is this feature on GitHub that lets us just throw up arbitrary text files effectively and make them available on the web. So let me see if I've got something else to add to this. Just put that in there.
Can I just interject very quickly?
Yeah.
This little thing that's coming up on your screen called Clippy, that is something that I find, I use something similar, so useful, which is a clipboard history thing. So
Anyone not using a clipboard manager, own up. All right, if I ask the same question next week, honestly, I'm going to live longer than all of you by quite some margin because I've been using a clipboard manager for like 10 years. Okay, everyone next week, you're not allowed through this door unless you're using a clipboard manager, all right? What is a clipboard manager? If you're living in the prehistoric era where you thought the clipboard could only save one thing at a time that you can copy and paste, what are you doing at the Peregian Digital Hub is my main question.
Why are you only telling us this now?
Man, I need to really work on the entry criteria. Okay, so as you can see, instead of just regular copy and paste, Shift Command V, I've got 60 things on my clipboard that I can. And in a world of working with LLMs, this is super important, right? You're doing stuff in ChatGPT, it's giving you an answer. You want to copy that, you want to copy the next thing, you want to just copy this bit, you want to just copy that bit. Then you want to go across into a document. And rather than, oh, it's exhausting just to think about it, you want to basically take your clipboard and say, yep, there's that bit that I copied there, paste that, paste that, paste that, paste that.
Now we finally
All right.
understand why you only have one screen that you work off, Chris.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Everyone has a clipboard manager next week, please.
and if you
And
want
then
to,
next week we'll teach you how to take screenshots on your computer. All right, so a gist is basically I'm just putting arbitrary text into this little, think of this as just like a little text file, like Pastebin or any of those things that you've previously used. I give it a little name. I'm just going to say testdemo.json in this instance, whatever it might be, .txt, .md, whatever. I create the gist, and you'll see that it gives me a URL for it. But if I want to use it, you can see if I sent you this, there's a whole lot of web page information around this that we don't really want. So if I go to raw, that gives me a link to the actual naked raw text that I just put in that file. Now I can copy this and I can use it, for example, in our little get thing. Remember how I showed you the get? Where this is just going to go and get a file of text from whatever arbitrary URL we put here. I can now take that just URL, put it in here, whatever I go and put in there, and of course I can edit it, which is quite nice. So I can go back here and go back and I can edit this gist. It's just like a mini CMS. So I can just keep updating this little bit of text. It's free service, and that's going to keep my AI agent updated. That's not why we're here. That's just a bonus, people. So if you went to this gist and you copied it, remember, really quite a cool thing about n8n is the fact that, how would I copy and paste this? I'd go to raw, Command A, Command C, and come back to a fresh workflow, which we're going to create here, new workflow, and I'm going to paste. And if I paste that, quite incredibly, it paste that entire workflow in here, where all I'm going to really need to do is top and tail a few things so that it's not using, Chris's system prompt and authentication token and all that kind of stuff. But at least you have the guts of the Slack bot here so that you can machete your way through the webhook registration process and all those other things. So if you've got that to that point now where you've copied and pasted that gist, now all we're really going to need to do is if we go into this webhook URL, we're obviously going to have to, in Slack, in our personal Slack channel app, we're going to have to set this up so that Slack knows that it should send messages to this particular webhook. Okay? So that's a key step that we're going to need to do. If you click into this node here, you can see all this is really doing is to see, does the incoming message, does it have a bot ID? And if it does have a bot ID, in other words, if the bot ID exists, if that is true, then we want to do nothing. If it's false, in other words, the bot ID doesn't exist, then we're going to send it to this next if statement. Does it contain this little code called reset? And if it does contain the code called reset, it's going to wipe the memory. If it doesn't, it just continues into our agent and does its thing. Let me quickly show you this working, so I'm not giving you nonsense here. So firstly, let me see if I can reset this. Right, I could say, how does membership work? I might even see this working in real time, maybe not. Oh, it's because I've got to set this, there's the thing where you membership at the hub is designed, blah, 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 blah. You know, so remember, I created this and you'll see from my system message, I have quite a convoluted system message there specifically for Mia, our trainee. I wanted to create a friendly onboarding agent that would help her and sort of coach her, teach her, train her as she's onboarding with the hub. But it's very specific to the hub, so you're going to totally change the system message that you find in here. Okay, it's just a placeholder. You're going to totally change that. At the bottom of the system message, you'll see it says accessing hub knowledge. You must use your tools to access reliable, up-to-date information about the hub. So all of that information that it just gave me here, applying for membership, membership types, pricing, etc., isn't in its system prompt, it's where? It's in this document, and it's using this tool to go and fetch reliable information. As we learned over the last couple of weeks, this is RAG. It's retrieving and augmenting its answer by taking the tokens from this, putting it in the token stream and predicting the tokens that it then feeds to our answer here. So we've been going, we all know what's going on there. So for your little version of this, of course you can have as many different RAG type tools here that go and get information from different sources. Last week we learned about how you can connect this to a handy Google spreadsheet, and that way the team can keep updating information in there that might be useful. Of course you could connect this to Notion, you could connect this to a whole range of other sources. So let's do the Slack part. Oh, I've been absolutely fearing this step. Let me first say that I actually think the n8n documentation is pretty good. If you find yourself at the credentials page at any point in time and you're going to add a credential, let's just say, you know, I'm going to add a credential for Google, God forbid. Continue. If you, on all of these little authentication setup modals, you'll always see this. Click on that. Their documentation is really good in terms of stepping you through how to get that particular authentication done. And the Google OAuth service, I'm hoping we run out of time. It's a horrifying experience, but actually I just followed this instruction. So rather than me trying to explain to everyone how to follow the instructions, you can do it. And if you run into issues, come and talk to me. But the reason it's worth doing the Google one is, you know, who's a Google Cloud user effectively? Gmail, Calendar, Sheets, Docs, presentations, Drive, YouTube, all of those things, right? You now make those available to your agents. that thing can do all sorts of stuff. It can be a personal assistant that has access to your email, that drafts emails, reads emails, create documents for you in one shot. Go and check your likes on YouTube to see which YouTube videos you've liked and then transcribe them. So many things you can do with that. So the pain is worthwhile, but I'm hoping we don't get to it today. So let me close out of that. All right, let's go to the Slack steps. And we're really just going to follow the instructions that we get here. Okay. Now, the URL for this, I'm just going to put, just to make it a little bit easier than everyone searching around for it, I'm just going to put it in a separate page here. All right, that should take you to the Slack documentation. Everyone has a slightly different Slack setup, but let me just say, if you're not the admin of the Slack, you're not going to be able to do this. You have to be an administrator of your own Slack. I'm guessing, Owen, you're not the Shopify admin of. If you are, can you add all of us? Please, it's very interesting to learn what's going on there. But yeah, you need to be the admin. And let's go through the steps here quickly. So, we're going to use, there are a couple of different options, but we're going to use the API access token. One, because that allows you to use the hub n8n that we've got set up, rather than using OAuth where you connect your personal account to it. You're just going to go and get a token from there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up the Slack apps page. And we're going to create a new app from scratch. So we're going to click on create new app, and you have this option, create from scratch. Give it a name and select the workspace you'll be developing your app in, and then select create app. And you should end up on a page like this. This is right up there with the top 10 worst interfaces, where the champion is undoubtedly Google AdWords, followed by Meta ad interface, and this is trailing down in 10th position. The third is definitely the Google OAuth UI. I hope you're all watching this video. So once you've set up your app, if you have multiple apps, that little drop down there will show you the different apps you have available. Is everyone at this step? Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go to OAuth and permissions. So OAuth and permissions you will find down in this menu on the left-hand side here. Click on that. And these are the pertinent fields that we're going to be using. So once we have that, we're in the scopes section. We need to go and set up some scopes. Scopes are the things that we want to give our app or bot permission to do. Deleting the entire Slack workspace is, for example, not a permission you want to give the bot. Oh, thanks. So if you open scopes in a new tab, and for those of you who've never opened a new tab on your computer, you can hold Command or Control and click on a link. And miraculously, a tab will open without refreshing the existing page you're on. So here are some suggested scopes that you can use. And I'll quickly show you how to do that. So we have scopes down here. And if I were to click on add an OAuth scope, So the scopes we're adding in this instance are for the bot, in other words, for the app. So, oops. Add OAuth scope, and you're going to scroll through this list and add the scopes one by one that we need for our bot. And you can imagine that the sorts of things that we're going to want it to be able to do is you're going to want it to be able to read mentions of itself. I probably have given this a little bit too much, but you're going to be able to, you want it to be able to send a message, so that's chat write, read, maybe I should just copy and paste these into another slide for you, just for reference. Probably I'm not to do it, but anyway. All right, those are the references that those are the scopes that I've assigned to my Hub Slackbot. May not be correct, probably a few too many there. So work your way through. I mean, Slack does have the recommended ones here. I think I mostly followed that. And then the next step is, after you've added scopes, go up to the OAuth tokens and select install to workspace. So I've already done that, I think, on mine. So I think you'll see it here. So underneath these tokens, I think yours will say install to whatever your workspace is. You have to select allow. Okay, we're getting pretty close now. Has everyone managed to get to that point? Everyone okay? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do, once we've installed it to the workspace and we've selected allow, we are going to copy this bot OAuth token, copy that. And enter it as the access token in your n8n credential. So if you want to create a credential, the way to do that, if you're not already on that page, is the plus button up left there, credential. You'll then be able to search for Slack. We're going with, just check, I think we're going with Slack API. Slack API, we're going with Slack API. So again, credential, Slack API. Continue, and then you should see a modal like this. And for access token, you're going to paste your bot OAuth token in there. And if it pops up here and says connection tested successfully, that's a good sign. Give you a minute to do that. Anyone need any help? I mean, you know, we're really just following along the docs here. It's no other way to do it. Okay, if everyone's managed to do that, the next step is that we need our webhook. we need to get our webhook from here, and we need to give that to Slack so that it knows where to send these messages to. So if you go to your production URL for your webhook, and you copy that to your clipboard by clicking on it, you should be able to then come back into our Slack, and now the next step is we're going to go to event subscriptions below the OAuth and permissions. Event subscriptions over here. And you should be able to paste in your webhook. And the second you paste it in, it should try to verify that that webhook is available. Now, if you haven't made that active and saved it, it's definitely not going to work. So that was just my test one. I don't really want that one. My actual workflow.
So, Chris, when are you going to build an agent that just lets us?
Well, interesting you should say that. Steve Ringo is giving a presentation next week on. There is an n8n MCP server now. So you can just sit in Cursor and say, make me a workflow that does this. Connects via the n8n API, which is an API, and we'll construct that for you. But let me just say, this stuff that we're doing here, the authentication stuff, there's no automation for that. And this is the sort of dirty secret of n8n, is like, this is the hard part, is connecting these various bits and pieces. But look, we're doing pretty well, I think. So let me just quickly find my one. Slackbot. So you can see mine is active and it's saved. I've got my production webhook URL, and then in Slack, I'm going to paste that, and we should get this nice little green tick here, which tells us that Slack was able to communicate. It sends what's called a challenge, which isn't like a full-on fake request. It's just, almost like a handshake just to see, is that thing alive? And if that pops up and gives us verified, we're in business. If you've managed to see that verified thing, put your hand up. I'm coming to shake your hand. Anyone got that? Anyone got that working? No one. Gula? Yeah, now, let me just say that some of you who are setting up your self-hosted, who don't yet have the domain properly resolving and so forth, this will still be a challenge because it probably has, it might have the port and might have other things that are not quite right there, so we'll help you get that sorted out. But if I can do this, anyone can do it. What that is doing is creating the connection between Slack and our cloud-based workflow. Go back to the workflow here. What else did we need? Send message. I'm going to give you a little bit of time because you've got to get that Slack bit right, and then you probably want to just change a few of these things. Mind you, to test it, you probably don't really need to worry about it. Of course, you can come in and change how your agent behaves at any moment in time. We want to just test that this is kind of working end to end, and then we'll come back and we'll tinker with the agent and make sure that it's giving us the right answers and tools and all that sort of stuff. Matt, just FYI, there is a, if you click on this learn more here,
Yep.
It shows you what the challenges. You know how I showed you we could just go to the browser
Punch it in.
and
Yeah.
punch those things in?
Yeah.
I think that way you can at least check to see, is the webhook.
Okay, try that.
Just tell me, is yours, what do you have set as the response
Immediately.
immediately? Authentication none.
Indication.
Because I think all that step is testing, is just to see, it's not testing the workflow or anything like that, it's just testing to see can it handshake with the web URL. Has anyone managed to get it working? God. I'm gonna have to find some good YouTube videos to share with you. I mean, that webhook step is pretty basic. I don't know why that wouldn't be working.
Chris, I haven't tried to get this particular one working, but while you were doing this, I was just having a look at some of the other Slack functionality built into n8n. And
Yeah.
there is actually a dedicated Slack trigger node as well. So, which
Maybe easier to use.
it may end up being easier to use.
Yeah.
I might be able to put a little demo together
Okay.
for next week. And because that's something that's on my backlog for my own
That would be good.
use, so Yep.
Yeah, I can't think why that wouldn't be working, so we've got that.
So Slack's effectively
We've got
retrieving the results and
We've got it saved.
giving it the permissions and credentials to do so with this workflow.
Yeah, and I think you can think of these as sort of two different steps, because at least in the way I've got mine configured, and what Steve's saying is that there's a node, I think there was a reason I didn't use it, but there's a thing here called Slack trigger, which I think what I wanted to use was the webhook rather than the Slack trigger. I can't remember why, but feel free to try that. I think it should still work the same. Might have been because of this check if what, I can't quite remember, but you can try that. But what we're doing is we're catching a webhook here, and the bit that we need the auth token for is actually this part here. So you know how we set the auth token? So there's sort of two separate things. Is what we're fiddling with at the moment is it able to see our webhook here and send information to it? And some of us are struggling with that. And then secondly, if we did the app setup correctly and we gave it the right scopes and so forth, then the credential that we set up is used here for the same message. But the credential may also be usable for the Slack trigger. I'm not quite sure, because I haven't used the Slack trigger before.
the Slack trigger seems to use a different credential for the receive and the send, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, look, I was worried about that one because it did take me quite a while to get the, I think the workflow is there and probably will work quite nicely. But getting that webhook set up did take me quite some time. So why don't we take that offline and try and help each other? I'm gonna just create a little section in the Slack here called, I'm just gonna call this, n8n help. Oops. Okay, if you look up n8n help, let's help each other in there. If anyone figures out how to do this, I'll find some useful YouTube videos, chuck them up there. Everyone can see that, n8n help. I'm sorry that I knew that was gonna be tricky, which is why we left it to the end. And we haven't even done the Google bit, which, makes that look easy by comparison. But I will say, if you wanna give the Google thing a go, the Slack docs are pretty good. So, go to built-in nodes here, find the Google one. Configurations, I think. Where is it? I'll put the Google. Okay, so I'll put this link in as well for those who want to try to add Google. Yeah, I think there was a fail at the end there, but we'll try and help each other through that last step. It's peculiar to every individual and how their Slack set up and so on. Hopefully the webhook part, we'll have a grasp on, and that can get you quite a long way in terms of connecting from apps and systems into workflows that you have in the cloud. We didn't get to scheduling, but I'll quickly preview that for you. That is very, very simple. So, let me just quickly go to add a node here just to show you that. So schedule trigger. What's going on? Schedule trigger, double click on that, and simply you're going to specify, think of this as a sort of thing that runs triggers automatically based on time. I want this to happen one day between triggers at a given time, 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 7:30, whatever, you're going to change that. And then this is going to be the starting point for our workflow. So, if that was, I could imagine quite a cool one where it might be ideas for social media content. It might call out to our agent. So it triggers every morning, calls out to our agent here. It's going to come straight into this, saying it's time to get to work. This AI agent is going to have some tools here, one of which might be Perplexity search, web search, maybe a connection to our social media, whatever. A prompt that basically says your job is to surface a candidate content for our social media channel. Tells it exactly how it should do that, what format it should do. We're just looking for ideas at this point, and what it's going to do is connect to an action node here that will say send you an email in the morning that says, based on the stuff that I've read that's happened over the last 24 hours in the domain of AI or whatever your company does, here are some thoughts about potential social media posts that you could put up. So that's just a sort of simple starting point, but you could imagine you could go to the races with whatever workflow you want. As ever, old Nate is the n8n guru. I learn a lot from watching his stuff, and maybe he's got a good. Maybe he's got a good.
Hey guys, so what we're going to be looking at today is the ultimate personal assistant, and I'm super.
So I do have one hint.
Yeah.
Which is to go to the n8n website, and to the actual. So look up, for example, Slack integration, right?
Yeah.
They're like a Slack trigger.
Yeah.
And from there, they usually link you. So there's you're on credentials, but that's okay. If you click on Slack trigger, just a little bit further down, right, up, there, yeah. Now scroll down, and what you can see is related resources. So I think a little bit further up. And so there, view example workflows and related content. So if you now go to, there's a whole bunch of different Slack things, and you can click load more. And the beauty about this is if you click on one of those, just click on the first one, it's fine. You can say use for free. You can look at it in the browser and you can click use for free. And what it'll do is you can just copy and paste the workflow into your own.
So how do we copy and paste? You right click, select all, Command
That's
C.
a great idea,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, so then you can, you can then come in here. It's a very powerful thing that the other workflow things don't have. You can
There
just
is
paste it
actually,
straight from there.
on the n8n page, down the left is actually a little thing, hit get for free, and then it actually gives you a bunch of different options.
Yeah, or you can buy them from the people on YouTube who apparently are making millions from this, according to the YouTube,
Yes.
according to these YouTubers. All right, thank you. Let's wrap it up there.